to another training video of the Point of Sale Pro Management System. In this training video, we will be reviewing setting up and using the accounts payable system. I'm going to begin by going here to the accounts payable general ledger menu. I can come down here and access vendor maintenance from this menu. I can also go to inventory control and come down here and access vendor maintenance from this menu. So let's just go up here and we'll go right into vendor maintenance. I can look up a company name. So let's say we want Acme Supply Company. Type in the first few characters of it. It highlights Acme Supply Company, and then if I click the edit button or double click on the line item or just press enter like all the other menus, it will default to whatever's in red. Just double click on here. This is going to pull up the information for the Acme Supply Company vendor record. Up here we've assigned a unique code to Acme Supply Company, and what I usually recommend is use something that makes sense to you. So in this case, Acme Supply Company, I made the vendor code ACMESU. So I can look at that code anytime and I know that it's Acme Supply Company. Down here I'd have their address, additional address information, city, state, zip code, what my preferred shipping method is with them, where it's FOB out of, in this case Phoenix, what my account number is with them. I can also come down here and put in whatever the beginning date was we started doing business with this vendor. Up here I have other demographic information, phone numbers, additional phone numbers, fax numbers, who my contact is with Acme Supply Company, their tax ID number. Put in whatever their tax ID number might be. This would be what my current balance is because this account was already here. What website, their website address, their email address for the contact there. What I've set up as their terms. I can click down here and select whatever terms I want for this vendor. I can also come here to add edit, and I can add or edit any of these terms that are set up in our customer terms list. Over here I have what my average lead time is from this vendor, which would mean how many days from the time that I order something until the time that something is received in the stock. Let's say we get stuff within a week, 7 days. My minimum order amount, this has to do with my purchase orders, as does the average lead time when I'm creating an auto purchase order. Minimum order amount, it will allow me to do a order for less than $100, but perhaps I have to have at least a $100 order in order to get free shipping. It will alert me that's below my minimum order when I'm doing a purchase order, and I have the option to override that if I want to. When I'm receiving and it's matching what I receive against what I have ordered on a purchase order, this gives me my maximum allowable cost discrepancy during receipts, so that I can't receive something that I thought I was paying $10 for and find out when I'm receiving it, it was $100. Payments on hold, if for some reason I want to place payments on hold for this vendor, I just simply check this box, and then when I'm doing my select invoices for payment, this vendor's payments will not come up because we have them set for on hold. I can also tell it that when I'm receiving inventory to stock, I do not want to print inventory labels for items received from this vendor. I can also create reminder for this vendor, which is just, this is a reminder about this vendor. I can tell it who I want to send it to, and let's just say we want to send it to myself, Robert Dash. I can select them. I can select other people I want to also send this reminder to. Click select, and then whatever comments I want to appear on the reminder, so when they log in, this pops up for them to follow up on something. And I just type in here, make sure you follow up. If I spell it correctly. Follow up with this vendor. By default, it'll go to tomorrow's date. I can tell it to pop up next week if I want to. And then just click close, and that reminder will send out to those two individuals that we selected. Let's go to the Purchase Defaults tab. Over here, this is the Pay To, which is information that comes from this vendor detail screen. If I change that, so this can be different address than what I have here. If I don't have anything here, I can just say copy from vendor detail and it'll update this with this account. This is my default general ledger account. If I'm using the general ledger system that I want expenses to get expensed to, in this case I'm buying inventory. Let's just look like inventory liquors coming from them. That happens to be, let's say it's inventory grocery taxable. I can edit, select a different chart of accounts, add one in here if I don't have one already select. I can tell it that replace my base cost with the receipt cost divided by a dollar amount. This base cost in the inventory record is used to represent what the original cost was from this vendor. So let's say that we have a vendor that we do a lot of business with and they give us their cost less 10%. If I also wanted to set up some promotions that they have, or they're going to have the following week, they're going to have a promotion and I can set those promotions up here. I can say the promotion starts on January 1st through January 15th, and I get 20% off anything that I purchase. Well, that's going to be 20% off our base cost, not 20% off our already discounted price of 10% off. I can tell that I don't want to allow back orders for this item. So when I select this, it doesn't create a back order for items that we do not receive from this vendor. This is the number of days supply to order on purchase orders. This is when I'm doing the auto purchase order, this applies to that information, how many days supply to order on purchase order. When I'm less than this reorder point in days, it will generate my reorder point based on that number. And if I had the multi-site, how many days supply to leave in the warehouse if I'm also ordering stuff from the warehouse in addition to from that vendor. Up here is the cost promo start and cost promo end dates and the discounts off that we just reviewed. I can do electronic data import and price cost import. So if they're giving me data files, I can tell it which fields are the SKU, the cost, description, price, what the vendor ID is, best cost, quantity. This gives me all the detail on how to set these up. Then when I receive regular pricing data files from this vendor, I can go ahead and import those data files and update my cost accordingly. Electronic purchase order transfers, if they allow electronic purchase orders, I can set up what their phone number is or what the login, the password to transfer purchase orders directly to their computer. If I'm using QuickBooks, I can tell it what the QuickBooks vendor name, general ledger account, and freight account are for this vendor. So if I'm transferring this data to a QuickBooks general ledger, it'll know which general ledger accounts to put it to. On this notes and FTP screen, this is just additional notes I want to select for this vendor that I have available. These are notes 1 through 5. I can also have additional notes down here, which is an entire book. If I'm sending purchase orders to them through another method, I can also tell it that this is the FTP address, the user ID, password, what directory it goes to, what our account number is, and what format we're using. We have a default Ash Systems format, and then we have format from several different vendors. On the auto pricing tab, down here I can tell it to automatically calculate pricing and or cost based on the criteria below for the items from this vendor. So then I can tell it that when my last cost, here, and I can select whether I'm changing the last cost, average cost, price would be, but if I select when my last cost is manually changed, it means I've edited it in the inventory record. I can tell it to change our selling price, or price level B. This could say wholesale price if I'm selling to other vendors. Whatever price levels I have here. In the case of our price, I tell it to increase it by 50%. And that will increase our selling price whenever our last cost is manually changed. And I can also come over here and say a SKU range, that this only applies to items from this SKU range to this SKU range, and this SKU range to this SKU range. So that way I'm not doing all items I get from this vendor, just items in this SKU range. And then I can add and delete and select more items on here. Vendor detail. So here I'm looking at vendor detail. I can go to payments and invoices as the accounts receivable also operates. Down here I can see all the invoices I've entered for them, what general ledger account it got posted to, what the purchase order number was when we received it, the date that it's due, the invoice amount, any discounts that we've taken, and the amount that we've paid. And in this case, we haven't paid any on these. If I was going to pay all these just as with our accounts receivable, I could select all and pay all of them. It's going to show my total check. I could deselect all. I could say just pay this one, and on this one I'm only paying $10. It's going to show what my total is based on the items I've selected up here. You can see that in this particular vendor we have a discount set up, so this invoice was August 13th. And if I pay it by 9/12, I get a discount of 24 cents. Well, my current date is beyond 9/12, so if I pay this $10, it's not going to take my discount amount. I can tell it to always take the discount, and then it'll always take that discount regardless of whether I'm beyond my discount date or not. I'm going to cancel, let's cancel this, and then we will come back into our payments and invoices again. And I could change the order. Right now I'm in date order. I could say descending order, ascending order. Likewise with invoice, purchase order number, date due. I can change all those orders here based on which column I have set up. If I wanted to edit a particular invoice, I could just click on highlight, click edit, come in here and put in my initials, change the PO number, change the general ledger account, change the amount, freight amount, and the due dates. I can also come down here and change my general ledger distribution that is currently already set up for this, and then just save this account. Lets me know that journal is saved. I can delete one of these entries if I inadvertently entered one that I didn't need to have on here, or if I have it set up so that when I'm receiving stuff to stock, my person that's doing receivables creates an accounts payable invoice and they entered it wrong, I can delete it and just re-enter it manually. Or I can manually add an invoice right here, and again I would just type in my initials, whatever the invoice number was, any remarks I want on there, I purchase order number if I have one. This is the default general ledger account that gets set up for this vendor. I could change it if I wanted to. How much the invoice was for, say it was $100, there was $12 freight, so the discountable amount is only $88 to base my discount on. This is the invoice date. I could change the date due, but it's automatically going to put the date in there based on what my invoice date is and what the terms are for this vendor. So this is telling me I have 2% 10. This is telling me the invoice date's 12/7. The due date's January 6, which is net 30, and then my discount date is December 17th. And if I pay it by the discount date, I can take an additional $1.76. We'll click here and we'll see what the general ledger distribution is. Here it's going to show that $100 to account number 2000, which is accounts payable. $88 got expensed to account number 1250, which is inventory grocery taxable. And then my freight is posted to my freight expense account. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to, well, before I save this, if this was a vendor that, let's say my rent payment, that I'm paying rent, or mortgage payments to, or a car payment, and I pay those every month, I could tell it that this invoice is a recurring invoice, and it recurs monthly, and when I click on save, it will create 12 invoices, one for each month for a year. I could say that's quarterly, in which case it would create 4 of them for the year, or annually, and it would create one for the following year. So I am going to uncheck that because this is not a recurring invoice. I could also say this invoice is an automatic deduction, and this will be deducted and no check will be printed. That's the way I want to handle this invoice. It will automatically deduct from my accounts that I have set up, but the check will not be printed. So let's go ahead and save this. It'll just tell me that journal entry and the adjustment was saved, and now I can see this is the one that we just entered in here. Okay, I'm going to delete this just for reference, and I require my ID and password. I'm going to show you, yes, I do want to delete it. It's going to let me know that that was deleted. Let's look at history. I'm going to come down here and click View History. On my history, I can come here and I can see all purchase order numbers, all dates. I can click on date order. Now it's going to be in date order instead of purchase order number. If I scroll down here, I can see most current purchase order numbers. I could click on look up PO number if I was looking for a specific PO number and type in 389. It's going to go right to that purchase order number I was looking for. And as I click on each of these, it's going to show me the details of what's on that purchase order when they receive these items to stock. So if I wanted to create an accounts payable for this invoice because they've received this to stock through purchase orders receipts, because I can see a purchase order number in here, and we do not have it set up to automatically create an accounts payable in the system settings, then I can come right down here and say, okay, this is the invoice that we received to stock. I can say go ahead and create an accounts payable invoice for it. This is letting me know that this invoice number already exists for this vendor, which is invoice number 1234444. So if I click OK, I'm going to delete this because that tells me that I already have an invoice for this vendor, and here it is, 123444. So I've already added that in as an invoice. Let's go to view history again. I'll look up and say purchase order number 389. Let's put this in date order. So if I click on invoice M388, create an accounts payable invoice, that did not let me know that was already there. I can put in my initials again. This is the invoice number that came from this record. I can put any remarks. This is the purchase order number, the default general ledger account, and the amount, freight, everything that we just reviewed. I click on save, it's going to let me know that that was created. And if I close this and go back here, I can see that this is that invoice we just created for purchase order number M388 for $3.65 was the discount. And I didn't have to enter any of this information. I just did it based on what they had received in stock. I could edit this if they had received it to stock and didn't put a freight amount on there. I could edit it after the fact also if I wanted to. So let's go back to history again. Had I written a check, you can see here, these are all check numbers for ones that I have written. I can click this check number and it'll put it in check number order. I can scroll through it here. So let's say check number 164. For some reason I want to void that check. I just select this line item, click void check, put my ID and password again, and this will back out the general ledger entry and invoices paid. I make sure I want to void this check. I just click yes, and it will void that check. I can reissue that check if it got lost in the mail or for some reason I applied it incorrectly. I'm going to go say no, and we'll just leave that check here. So we clicked on void check. We created an accounts payable invoice from history. I can view if I'm date order, and I click date order here. I can click the oldest one first, or I can click the newest one first, and it'll just go through the listing of how I'm looking at those invoices. Here I got newest first, and if I click oldest first, and I scroll back up that list, you can see the old at the top of the list is the oldest one first. Look up the check number, which you've done already. I can delete a transaction if I need to. If this was entered incorrect, I can delete it. Again, it's going to require my ID and password, and just tell me that it will delete this item. I'll say no. I can also generate a report of accounts payable, and when I go in there, I'll have a couple of different options I can select. So let's close my history. So we reviewed editing and editing an invoice, deleting one from payables. If I'm in date order, again, just like the other one, I click on descending order, and now it just changes the order I'm looking in. Ascending order, likewise if I do it by invoice, and then I can click on descending order or ascending order. Now it's time to write a check for this vendor. So if I wanted to pay all checks, I could click select all. It'll say that it's paying all these checks. And you see in this case, invoice amount's $11.90, and my discount was 24 cents, but I'm paying the entire amount because I'm after my invoice discount date. If I unselect these, deselect all, and say always take the discount, and then let's say select all again. Now you can see that it took my discount because I've told it that regardless of whether I'm paying it by the due date or not, I still want to take my discount, and I'll argue with them about it after the fact. So this is one way I can do it. I'm going to deselect all. I'm going to just pay one invoice, and we'll pay this invoice right here. It's going to pay the entire amount. If I only wanted to pay $5 on this, I could pay $5, or I could tell it to pay the entire amount. When I select whatever I put here, it's going to total up what my check amount should be down here. When I'm done with this, I can click on Save and Print Check. Save and update this vendor, yes. I'm going to say print check. If I said no to print check, it's going to ask me the check number, so I could say that this was an electronic payment if I wanted to. So I still keep track that it's paid, but I paid it electronically, or maybe I did an auto payment with them. And the check date and what checking number it comes out of. I'm going to cancel that, and we'll go back here. We'll pay this invoice again, $7.50. Save and print check. Save and update vendor, yes. This time I'm going to say yes to print check, and it's going to show me the next check number, what date I want to appear on the check, what checking account I'm going to go to. In this case, I'm going to select my regular checking account. That should be what I had selected up in the general ledger setup, and then click on OK. This will generate the check. It's going to prompt me for which printer I want to print to. I'm going to select the printer I always print to, or put my checks in there, and then it will ask me that the check's print okay. So if I forgot to put a check in there or selected the wrong printer, I could say no and start this whole process over again. If it did print correctly, I just click on yes, and that check's been paid. If I go back to payments and invoices, I can see that $7.35 invoice isn't in there, and I can go to view history here, or if I cancel, I can also go to view history here. So if I put it in check order, and now click up, look up my check number, I don't know, what was it, 1165? Nope, it was 1161. This is the invoice we paid today. And it'll show me this is the detail, the check number, which purchase order number it was, what I purchased on that check. I'll also look at a sales graph. This will show sales that we did to that vendor for the current year and the previous year in the sales graph format. I could also print a copy of this if I wanted to. So let's click on close. Let's click on close here. Again, I could click on edit or add new accounts payable vendors. Let's add one vendor in here, and let's say, I'm going to say yes to add vendor, and this, I'm going to put in Consumers Energy. So put in Consumers Energy for the vendor name. Consumers Energy. I could go through and put the address, zip code, all this other information, account number, phone numbers. I'm not going to do that right now, but I'm going to go to the purchase defaults. Here it would show what the purchase defaults were. I copy this from my vendor detail. It would have copied all that information. What default general ledger account this goes to, and we'll go down to an expense account and say this is utilities. Utilities expense. Now I can go to payments and invoices, and I'm going to add a new invoice in here, and I'll put my initials in here, December 18 for the invoice number. There's no purchase order number. This is the default account it's going to get expense to, and I'm going to say this is a $200 consumer energy bill. There's no freight. What I do different with this vendor is I usually put in the invoice date as the due date, and I have them set up for terms are going to be just due on receipt. So if this is due on January 2nd of 2019, it'll change this due date to 2019 because it's not always due on the 2nd. Next month it may be due on the 3rd. The following month it may be due on the 1st. So this allows me to just put in whatever the due date is as the invoice date and then save that transaction. Cancel out of here, and we'll close out of here. Yep, it does not tell me that there are not terms set up for this vendor yet, so it won't let me close. I'll just say that it's COD, so that way when I enter my invoice date, that will also become my due date. And let's close this vendor, and we will quit out of here. If we go back to the accounts payable again, once I've entered invoices for the vendor, now I want to come down here and select invoices for payment. And I can say, okay, I want to see all invoices that are due before 12/31. And I could say just for a specific vendor if I wanted to, or if I leave this blank, it will do for all vendors, and I click OK. Now it's going to give me a list of all vendors I want to pay invoices for. I could click here and change this to invoice order. I can click on vendor order. So now I can see that these are all vendors for example, Acme Supply down here. I could say, just like we did the accounts payable, always take my discount and select all invoices. It's going to tell what my total checks are. And if I click save print, it's going to break out and print one check for this vendor, one check for this vendor, one check for this vendor, so it's going to break out and print a check for each individual vendors. I'm going to click deselect all. So now I'm going to come down here and say, oh, I just want to pay Acme Supply, and I need to send an invoice to this Tree of Life vendor. And again, this is one reason I use something that makes sense to me for the vendor code, so that I know this is Tree of Life, this is Acme Supply, this is Trepco. So now when I click Save and Print, it's going to generate checks for each of these vendors. Saving up the invoices, yes. I'm going to say Print Checks, yes. And again, it's going to ask me for which printer I'm sending these to. In this case, I'll select my 2070 printer, what my beginning check number is, what date I want to appear on the check, and then I click OK, and it's going to generate those checks. They will no longer be in my list of invoices that are due. I'm going to cancel this because I'm not going to pay those checks right now. So accounts payable general ledger, once I paid those checks, I'm to select invoices for payment, or by selecting an individual vendor and selecting which checks I want to print, I can generate a check register for a specific vendor, or leave blank for all vendors, a specific date range. I can tell it I want to print check number, order, company number, order, vendor ID, and I can tell it whether I want to print detail or summary. If I click on View Print, it's going to generate a report. That's going to show I only did one check for Acme Supply Company. The invoice amount was $750. The check amount was $750. This is the check number, and the total of all my checks I did on this date, and the number of checks was just quantity 1. If I wanted to print this, I just click on Print Report, and I'll send it to my printer. Otherwise, I'm just viewing it here on the screen. Now that I've printed those checks, I can come down here. I can also generate an age payables report. Again, I can select which vendor, whether I want to see all age payables, whether I want to see a vendor ledger format, age payables just one line, age payables that are over past due 30, 60, and 90. Well, let's select all age payables, and I can say that only invoices as of this particular date, and what order I want to print it, whether I want a vendor ID or company order, and whether I want detail or summary. So let's just select it like this here. We'll click on View Print. This will generate a age payables report, and it's going to list each vendor, when invoice is due, and the total amount due for this vendor. Total amount for this vendor. It's going to go through and do each vendor, and then the total invoice accounts payable. That was my age payable report. I'm going to close this. I'll come down here again. I can go down to cash disbursements report. Again, I can select any vendor, any date range, what order I want to print by, and I can group it by general ledger account number if I want to. And if I click on Preview Report and View Print, now it's going to show me my cash disbursements report. Again, the only one I did was this one check today for the date range I had selected. So in review, we went through vendor maintenance, either from accounts payable general ledger menu or inventory control and vendor maintenance down here. We've also gone through and selected invoices for payments. We generated age payables report. We generated a check register. We printed checks. We generated cash disbursements report. So very easy to use, very intuitive. And that is the end of this training video. Be sure to check our website again for additional training videos coming soon. Thank you for watching.